Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to get started. But before we start today and introduce today's speaker, I'm going to be speaking to our convening principles and some housekeeping items. But first of all, I just wanted to take a minute to pay respect to the victims of the Nova Scotia shooting. The National Police Federation, along with the RCMP, have asked individuals to wear red today. And it's a day in mourning to honor the tragic loss of the 23-year-old veteran, Constable Heidi Stevenson, and all the innocent victims of Canada's worst mass shooting in Canadian history. Nova Scotia, it happened on April 19th. So along with Constable Stevens, there were 21 other individuals senselessly lost their lives. At this time, our thoughts go out to the individuals whose lives were cut short, their families that were left to wonder why, grieve, and live with this new reality, to the communities in Nova Scotia directly affected, feeling the loss, vulnerability, and without explanation, and to a country of caring Canadians reeling with empathy, fear, and confusion. Many of the individuals affected, I hope that they find peace in knowing that they're loved, supported, and in a nation's collective thoughts and prayers. So we'll go on today with some housekeeping items. So we're going to ask that you keep your audio on mute. Kevin may solicit questions at a time, you can ask, but if you keep it on mute, it just cuts out all the background chatter. You can choose your own view, how you want to view this webinar. So in the top right-hand corner, you can choose the speaker view or the gallery view that will allow you to see everyone. We will be having questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat bar at the bottom. And Bethan and I will be monitoring those. And at the end, we'll be able to address those to Kevin. Stick around to the very end because that's when all the meat comes out in the question and answer. And we are recording this session. So if you don't want to be on camera, please just turn your camera off. Often at our sessions, we invite you to keep your camera on because it is interactive. We want to be able to see that we're all here together. And if Kevin says something that particularly strikes a chord with you, or it's something you agree with or will use later, just give him a little wave of your hand so he knows you're out there. Importantly as well, we have an evaluation that will be sent out. So following this session, you will be sent the full recording. You will be sent some resource tools and tips, and we will also be asking you to fill out a very short, painless evaluation, we promise. So now we're going to go on to our virtual convening principles. We go by these principles because our world has changed. So when we meet, we need to know that, nobody signed up for this. Not for sickness, not for social distancing, not for the additional stress, not for the sudden halt of our collective lives together in our office or with our program participants and alumni. We will remain human-centered. We are going to prioritize supporting each other as whole human beings. We are going to prioritize simple solutions that make sense for most of us. And we are going to prioritize sharing resources and communicating clearly. We can and will continue our mission virtually. Shared experiences are no longer possible in person, but we will create emotionally engaging virtual spaces. We will remain flexible and adjust to the situation. Nobody knows where this is going and how long it will be on for and how we will need to adapt. Everybody needs support and understanding in this unprecedented moment. In times of crisis, we lean on strengths-based leadership, trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Now we're happy if anybody would like a full copy. I gave a summary of our virtual convening principles, but if you think this is something you would like to be using in your meetings, please just reach out. We're happy to send the full copy to you. Now, the moment we all came here for. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Kevin O'Reilly. Kevin is a recently retired vice principal from one of Waterloo Region's largest downtown high school, and he is refired with some energy and passion to use his personal mental health illness journey to help others. Kevin shares that he has not met a bad kid in 30 years of education, but many are stuck in loops of stress and angst that sneak up and take control of their brain and lives. Kevin missed 5 months of work in 2011 with general anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder and panic attacks. By working with his family doctor, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist, he is back. Kevin decided it is time to face mental illness, although he prefers to call it brain wellness, and come out of the shadows and talk about this previously taboo subject. He has long believed in Gandhi's statement, be the change you want to see in the world. And it's time to take the bat off your shoulder. Change begins with me, brain wellness begins with me. Kevin will challenge you to stop the stigma that is associated with brain illnesses, and that talking about the previously taboo subject is a key step to healing and getting our brains unstuck. Kevin is also past chairperson for Movember KW and was the 2013 Man of Movember for Waterloo Region for his work in mental health. Congratulations for that, Kevin. He shares about Movember's new added focus on men's mental health. I'll turn it over now to Kevin. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much, Dan. And thank you very much for having me. Little frog in my throat just waiting to talk. Thanks to both Diane and Bethan for the invite to be here. And they shared with me all the various groups that are represented, and I'm very impressed and astonished. Thank you for all you do to help other people that are struggling as a leader. And in the words of Mr. Rogers, during these troubled times, it's great to see so many helpers. And so thank you again. I want to share my journey down that rabbit hole of anxiety and depression. I want to share how I was a leader in my profession. I was a high school teacher, director of student activities, and a vice principal, all at the same time at one job. And plus I was coaching hockey, rugby, and basketball. And I'm wearing my red Rugby Wales shirt today. So I was able to do all that stuff until my brain stopped. It stopped working and burned out. And tasks started to take longer. Falling asleep at the computer was often happening. I was having memory problems, and the joy of life disappeared. So my goal today in speaking to you and speaking to as many people as I can is to help you better understand, in case you don't know someone or haven't lived with anxiety or depression, better understand your employees or family or friends who are living or battling with anxiety, stress, or depression. Maybe the clients you serve, and if you're working in education, maybe the students you work with, and maybe yourself as well. I know how challenging having conversations around mental health can be. Just the word mental brings up a whole stigma attached to it, the word mental. And also because very few people have been provided with training on talking about mental health and mental illness. So I want to normalize that conversation and make it easier and more comfortable for you and those you work with. I'm going to start sharing my slide here. Oops, did I just share you guys? Okay, let me stop that. I'm pretty new at this, so please bear with me. Okay, so share. Okay, Zoom's. Isn't that funny? We just practiced this a few minutes ago. So am I sharing right now? No. No, okay. There it is. Okay, I just didn't find the right thing that I wanted to find to share. I think what I'm struggling with is getting the. Okay, so I need to move this out of the way because your pictures. So everybody can see it right now? Okay, thank you. Okay, I just need to stop share for a minute. I didn't move some things over. This is, once again, my apologies. Escape. My notes page. Throw that over there. Okay. And we'll go back to start the share. Well, there it is. Okay. Some reason the Zoom. Okay, share the screen.
It's okay. You're amongst friends, Kevin. We've all had to learn new technologies. I've also had to learn Mario Kart amongst the many new technologies since we've been home. So you're amongst friends.
Good. So do I have it up there now properly? Okay. I was the past chairperson for Movember, and as we all know, Movember does prostate cancer. We grow our mustaches for prostate cancer, and Movember added testicular cancer, and then it added mental health about 7 or 8 years ago. I stepped down as chairperson a couple of years ago because I wanted to get the emphasis out that Movember is more than just prostate cancer and testicular cancer. I wanted to get the focus on mental health. So last November, I launched a presentation called 30 Talks in 30 Days. Movember does mental health. And I launched it on October 10th, which is World Mental Health Day. And this year's focus for mental health is actually on suicide awareness and suicide prevention. And so I started doing talks to high schools right after I got back to work 10 years ago with depression and anxiety, and sharing with my staff and sharing with students and classes what it was like. So this last fall, when I decided to launch this, I spoke at an elementary school on October 10th, and then that teacher, principal, vice principal, shared with other schools. And I kept getting asked to do younger and younger schools. Principals were contacting me saying, "I've heard about your presentation. We don't have a lot of behavior problems at our school. We have a lot of kids dealing with anxiety and depression at a very young age." And so I put together a presentation called Butterflies in My Tummy. That's just the Movember website that has the article in it that I launched on, if you want to go to that. But Butterflies in My Tummy is, we all feel butterflies in our tummy. I felt them last night thinking about doing this presentation for you. I felt them again this morning. We feel them before a big test, and it's a sign of excitement. But it can also be a sign of something going wrong. Little kids often feel those butterflies before the first day of school, and they're worried about it, but they're worried in an excited way. And so the butterflies are actually just the fight or flight response. And we also have those before a first date or a presentation or an interview. And so I talk about how this exciting response can go awry, and it's a good thing, but it also can turn into a bad thing. And I started to share strategies about how to get unstuck if you do get stuck. And then the principal started asking me if I could work with younger and younger kids. And so I started working with elementary kids at the grade 4, 5, 6 level. And then they said, "Well, can you work with grade 1, 2, and 3, or even kindergarten?" Because they're having kids dealing with stress and anxiety. And I can't talk to those kids about what it's like to have depression or to live with suicidal thoughts. So I started to practice teaching some of the practices that I use for mindfulness and well-being. And actually, I'm going to go to one of those right now. Look at that, it worked. So I want you to breathe in through your nose as the shape expands, and then out through your mouth. We'll do this like 3 or 4 times. So in through your nose, and then out your mouth. In your nose, and out your mouth. In your nose, and out your mouth. I'll share a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Okay, there it is. Oops, okay. I think I've got this. Go back one. Okay, so the breathing is really important, and learning to pause is really important. And Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men in the world, says if you continue to suffer, you'll continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything said to you. And true power is sitting back and observing things with logic. And as a leader, we learn that to hold back and not react right away. So true power is actually restraint. If words control you, that means everyone can control you. And he says breathe and allow things to pass. And there's the breathing again. And so I'm going to show you, actually I'll run through this one quickly. So that's his quote up there. But instead of reacting right away and letting other people affect you, we hit the pause button. And so when someone does something or says something to you that you don't like, that's mean or is hurtful, or if they post it online, which we see a lot of people reacting too fast to things online. If someone does something, pause before reacting. Your first thought or feeling is not who you are. It's often just that fight or flight, that anger response where we want to hit someone or run away. But that's not who we have to be. That's our old brain kicking in. Who we really are as people is what we do after that. We pause and give ourselves a chance for our second thought to develop, the calmer, more understanding one. And that's who you really are. So we pause and breathe. Now, I'll talk to you again a little bit later about the old brain, which is the fight or flight, and the new brain, and then how they're connected. So I want to demonstrate something with you. Now, I'm not sure, can you see my hand there if I hold up? Okay. So I'm going to inhale through my nose, and at the top, I'm going to count my blessings. Okay, I'm going to, my 3 kids, and exhale out my mouth. Inhale through my nose, my 2 grandkids. Our blessings don't have to be water. Inhale through my, or people, inhale through my nose. Blessing is having clear water. We're quite blessed. Inhale through my nose. It's above 0 today and not snowing. And inhale through my nose. I'm having my grandson over to sleep tonight. He's his family's the only family I contact with during this lockdown. So that strategy combines 2 things, the breathing, as well as when you're thinking about your blessings and gratitude, you can't be worrying at the same time. It uses the same part of the brain. So I'm going to ask you to do it with me as well. You don't have to hold up your hand, okay? But I'm going to suggest you do the breathing in and out, and at the top, just think of something you're grateful for, a blessing. So in your nose, a blessing, out your mouth. And just pause. In your nose, a blessing, something you're grateful for, out your mouth. In your nose, a blessing, out your mouth. In your nose, something you're grateful for, out your mouth. One last one, in your nose, a blessing, and out your mouth. The research shows that practicing that 3 times a day decreases anxiety, stress, decreases people's absenteeism, increases productivity and overall happiness. It seems too easy as a solution, but I'll tell you, as a guy that's diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, these are the kind of strategies that I practice that allow me to get back being the person I used to be. So depression's a liar. The only reason I have this one on here is because I want to read through it. So I know the font is way too small, but I just finished reading this book by Danny Baker. And this is one of the really cool sections he put in. So I'm going to read it word for word, which is what you're not supposed to do in a presentation, but it's too good not to read word for word. Adolescents need to be educated about depression. In my humble opinion, need to be educated about depression in school. They also need to be educated about depression at home, in the same way that they're educated about safe sex and drink driving. Why? Because they find themselves experiencing the symptoms. If they find them, they can then realize they're suffering from an illness and then go and get treatment. But if they don't know what depression is, they won't seek help, and as a result, they'll prolong their suffering. They might self-medicate with drugs and alcohol and develop an addiction. We know that a lot of people, the majority of people that are dealing with addictions are dealing with mental health issues as well. They might self-harm by ripping out their hair, cutting themselves with razors, or lighting parts of their body on fire. And worst of all, they might kill themselves. Some parents think of depression as something that's too dark for their teenagers to be exposed to. If you're one of those people, then let me give you some stats. And he goes on to share a bunch of stats. And I have a link, also show you the link to the Canadian Mental Health Association that has the stats. So it is really important for us to be able to talk about this. And if it's important for us to talk to our adolescents, we didn't get that training growing up as kids in school. Mental health is on the curriculum now, all the way down to grade 4, where they teach about resiliency and some mindfulness things. And then in high school, they get into some more depth. So during stressful times, there are those who will flourish. Some people will do great. Stress drives them, increases your focus, we work harder, and we work longer. So stress often gets a bad name, but stress can be a good thing, right? And help us be more productive. You know, stress helps us perform our best as athletes. But there's also those who can handle the stress for quite a while, until the stress sneaks up on them. And this is what happened to me. It takes longer to do tasks. You start having memory problems, concentration problems. You either can't get to sleep or you can't stay asleep. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about all the things that are going on. And eventually the everyday joy of life can disappear. Now, one thing to be careful is not to self-diagnose too much when I'm reading this to you. We all go through troubling times. You need to be living through this for a couple of weeks to months, and it's not getting better for it to be something serious to get help for. And so also, there's people that are somewhere in between those two extremes. So this is, again, I keep changing the name of things from mental health because I'll share why I don't like the term mental health in a few minutes, but this is a continuum model. And healthy people on the left have normal mood fluctuations. Their moods go up and down. They sleep in normal patterns, 8-9 hours a night if they can. Again, physically well, lots of energy, consistent performance, and socially active. What they should do to stay healthy is focus on the task at hand, break problems down to chunks, have supports available, and maintain a healthy lifestyle. But as we move across, okay, from being healthy into more reacting, you get nervousness, you start to get more irritable, and possibly sadness. Trouble sleeping, low energy, tired, muscle tension, procrastination. This is the stuff a lot of people are living through right now who are stuck at home and not used to this. And the interesting thing is, those of us that deal with anxiety and depression, we're not feeling stuck at home for some of us. Some of it is making it worse, but for some of us, it's kind of like, oh, this is kind of what my brain does on a regular basis. Decrease social activity, and then things to do, recognize your limits, get the rest, food, exercise, and have healthy coping strategies like don't watch too much of the TV, don't watch too much of the news, and then identify and minimize your stressors. So as it gets a little bit worse, okay, to where we'd be a medical model being injured, then it's something a doctor would call anxiety. Anger is the fight part of fight or flight. You feel like you want to hit someone. Anger does tend to come out more in male. Thing. I do generalize periodically between males and females, always allowing for experts to perform. My depression got so bad that I didn't want to sit at the dinner table with my kids and hear about their days. I had nothing left in my tank. And things to do, identify and understand your own signs of distress, talk to someone, seek help, and seek social support instead of withdrawing. And then at the worst end, the ill, the excess of anxiety, depressed mood. Anxiety is you can't turn your brain off. Depression is you've lived in anxiety so long your brain's burned out. So you can't get to sleep. One thing I'll notice in here is sadness is mentioned once, okay? And we often think people are depressed or sad. And I'm not a sad person. I was sad when my dog passed away. I've been sad at times in my life, but I'm a person that deals with depression, not overly sad. When I got divorced 7 years ago, which actually happened due to my depression, Valerie and I were married 28 years, raised 3 amazing kids. She's known me since I was 18, and I've dealt with depression all that time. We didn't know what it was back then. But as I came out of it and got healthy, she said, Kev, I need to go find out who I am in the world, away from that umbrella that she was living under. So when we divorced, I wasn't depressed, but I was very sad. And so I share that as kind of an understanding of the difference. So what you need to do is, again, when you get to this ill stage over on the far right, can't do your duties, absenteeism, and then seek help, follow the doctor's recommendations, and then regain your physical and mental health. So the different states of depression, I have something doctors call high functioning depression, which basically means you have depression and anxiety, but you just work your ass through it all the time, You just work through it all the time and until you burn out. And but the people could be in the middle, treading water, fulfill the obligations, but they're still dealing with those underlying things that they just lost the joy for life. Again, not being sad, but lost the joy, the ability to experience joy. And then possibly to the drowning part. This depression project is all part of that book that I talked about earlier about, that I took the quote from. So how do leaders support and help those doing well without pushing them too far? Because if you want something done, you always ask a busy person. So we want to be careful not to ask our busy people to do more. We want to make sure that they have good balance. How do you support those not doing well so they don't fall farther down the rabbit hole and end up going where I end up being that, I lived with this for years, but eventually after, 25 years of work, it got at the point where I ended up being off work. And then how do you support yourself, which is really important. So less obvious factors that lead to mental illness, being a yes person. trying to fix and save everyone, and people pleasing, and other needs of yours, and success defined by society's expectations, which is kind of neat that we're changing some of these right now, and understand that your mental health matters. So I was that guy. Say yes to the stress. It was, yeah, whatever needs to be done, ask me. I could get anything done the boss asked him to, stay up to the wee hours of the morning, make sure it's done, and then set the alarm, an extra hour early so I have more time in my day to make sure I get the job done. But then sacrificing sleep, which we should not sacrifice sleep. Sleep is so important to recharge our brain. It's like plugging our cell phone in, and if we don't plug it in and let it recharge, it burns out and it's no good to us. We're very similar to that. But it doesn't just apply to work. They need volunteers at your kid's school. They need someone to coach the child's team. And so, Terry Fox ran the rugby team, jump rope for heart, basketball team, the dances, friends need help moving. I was a yes, 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 yes guy. And I didn't know the proper healthy boundaries to have. I was actually looking for love and acceptance in the wrong ways for me personally. Little side story, a lot of my depression, anxiety is connected to my childhood. My father was a police officer, very tough, and I know some of you in the room are probably in that field, and the first responders. They see stuff and deal with stuff that the rest of us don't have to, and somehow alcoholism stuck up on my dad. And our home life was not a very good home life. And it took me a while to work with the counselor to get to the point where I could say I love my dad again, and I understand my dad, and he was just doing the best he could. Just like I don't want my kids to judge me too harshly because I have this thing called anxiety and depression. I'm doing the best I can with what I got. And so if you need someone to help you out, I was always that guy. But we need to pause and we need to breathe. And I want you to just take a moment to make either a mental list or a written list or type on a form on your computer of all the extra things you do. Because sometimes we take for granted all the various things we do and all the various hats we wear for other people. So as I continue to speak, make your list of all the various hats you wear and the various things you do for other people. And you'll be quite surprised, I think, how many things you do and how many different hats. So there's something called caregiver fatigue. It's also called compassion fatigue. I prefer the word caregiver fatigue, and I think it's important that we understand that. There's an article called Secondary Traumatic Stress, Understanding and Mitigating the Effects. And if you live under stress all the time for a long period of time, the symptoms, which I just talked about with anxiety that can lead to depression, are not a sign of weakness, it says. An indicator we might need support because you work in a challenging profession. So our first responders, they all live in this on a regular basis. A lot of you in leadership positions, you live in this on a regular basis because you're providing that support for other people. And so we have to take care of ourselves. So many, if not most leaders, got into leadership roles because they care. You want to make a difference, you see something that's not right, and you jump right in to fix it. Until almost out of nowhere, you start struggling with that. Jobs take longer to get done, memory problems, sleep issues, and the joy for life. And it could be stomach issues as well from the butterflies in the stomach. Could be all sorts of cramps, and there's headaches. There's so many other things we can talk about. So how do you take care of you? Because you have to realize you have to take time to recharge your batteries. You must schedule in your regular mental wellness or mental break or wellness practices. Now, I know I'm talking to leaders, and I know a lot of you know you should do this. I'm telling you, I didn't do it, and it cost me, and hopefully you do schedule yours in if you're not already. So a 5-minute walk around the building. As a vice principal in our courses to become vice principals, they said, if you go to the bathroom at the other end of the school, walk as far as you can to the farthest bathroom and come back. Because as a vice principal, you'll be pinned in your office all day. And so you find out ways to get that exercise. While I was out there, I got to talk to a bunch of different people, and that's why I get into education, not to be stuck in my office all day. So 10-minute chat with a supportive friend, or 15 minutes to practice a mindfulness strategy, or 1 minute to practice this breathing strategy. It only takes a minute. But you can't even five or 10 minutes a day to do these. And that's the part where we get stuck in. You have to make that time for yourself. And the reason is, when you get on an airplane, the stewardess telling you about the oxygen mask, and they say, put it on yourself first. And parents are thinking, I want to put it on my child first. No, you put it on yourself first, because if you're going to put it on your child and you pass out, it didn't get on your child. If you get on yourself first and your child is not doing well, you'll be able to get it onto them right away. So we really have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first and regularly. Caregiver fatigue is very real. So what strategies do you use for your own balance and well-being was one of the questions I had sent out in advance. And, that's not really, it's a one-way discussion right now. So it's, hopefully you have them, and hopefully as I move forward, you might pick up some from me or in the discussion from other people. It's not rocket science. There's lots of different strategies. You have to find what works best for you. I think the interesting part is a lot of people think you do have to do the one thing and that one thing will work. And it's not, it's a bunch of different things for different people. And then have you scheduled them into your day? So that's my challenge to you, is start scheduling your care, put the oxygen mask on yourself on a regular basis every day, and maybe multiple times a day. Another important one for leaders is learning to say no in a polite way. So be selective. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you must. And that's where I got stuck, because I'm handy in a lot of different things and I have a lot of skills. If someone asked, I could do it. And hopefully that doesn't come across as arrogant, but I was just a person that wanted to please others. So I would help whatever skills I had. So here's the line that I came up with. I think I stole it from someone. So if someone asks me to add one more thing to my plate when I'm already pretty full on my plate, I think it's a great idea you're doing, and I really support you doing it, but my plate's pretty full right now. I'm not saying no to them. I'm not rejecting their idea. I'm just saying that mine's pretty full right now. Okay, let's take you back through what happened to my brain. So it was 2001, the first time I had some trouble. Prior to that, I had some issues growing up, but nothing that I really knew was really bad. And my brain was racing, and at 4:30 in the morning, I couldn't get back to sleep. And that's like a bad Stephen King novel. No matter what time I looked over at that clock, it was going to say 4:30. No matter what time I went to bed or stayed up late, went to bed early, it was 4:30. And that's actually probably a good Stephen King novel. He probably wrote one like that. And eventually I couldn't remember things and students' names, which was really tough. At that time, I was still teaching, full-time teaching, and I couldn't remember the kids' names in my class. I couldn't remember the teachers' names I was walking past down the hall with, people I'd worked with for 5 or 6 years. And I thought, you know what, 2001, I was 39. I'm getting old. That's part of getting old, and that's wrong. We do not have to have memory problems as we get older. It's my memory is better now than it was 19 years ago. A big number. It went on for months, and I didn't tell anyone about it. And that is basically the anxiety of not being able to turn your brain off, not able to get to sleep or stay asleep. And eventually my brain and body burned out, because if you live like that long enough where you can't sleep and you're doing all the things, you keep saying yes to everything, it's like driving a car with one foot on the gas, one on the brake. Eventually you burn out your engine, you burn out your brakes, and you burn out, and that's what we call depression. So this butterfly is in my tummy. 1 in 5 of us will have depression right now in Canada, and I believe it's statistic for the whole world. So as I look across the screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, me, 1, 2, 3, 4, someone from that row, 1, 2, 3, 4, someone from that row. And it really is amazing when you see how many of us actually have it. And I don't believe it's an illness anymore. And I believe it's just how some of our brains work. And I don't know if the illness model helps us as much as it may have when we first started diagnosing people. So my brain, the 1 in 5, is a blessing and a curse. It helped me graduate university, so I've got a pretty smart brain, but it always made me feel like I was never good enough. And I've lived with that my whole life, that I was just never good enough and not deserving. So this is a picture of me, again, when I could grow hair and my November mustache, graduating from the University of Waterloo in kinesiology. I share this picture in particular because I have a medal around my neck. It's the Alumni Gold Medal. The top person in math, when they graduate, gets that for the top marks in math, the top in science, the top in psychology, the top in each area. And I got that for being the absolute top person in human kinetics and leisure studies when I graduated. But I never felt good enough. And while I was at university, I was having suicidal thoughts, even though my marks were in the 90s and 95. And that was no external pressure on anyone for me to do well. I was the first one in my family to go to university. There was no pressure expectation, but I couldn't sleep, and I didn't know that back then what it was. So my brain helped me become a high school teacher, but it made me feel like I lived under the black cloud that Eeyore lives under. That it was always, everything was so much work. It was like working through sludge to get things done, but no one ever saw that on the outside. On the outside, they saw the mask that I wore. It helped me become a high school vice principal, but again, it woke me up every morning at 4:30 and had trouble with memories. So that's a couple of years ago back at Cameron, 2014-15. Grew the beard in, grew the hair, whatever I had, and that's quite a few different shades of gray right now, I'll tell you, last time I grew it in. So my brain helped me become the quarterback in football in high school, but it made me feel like I didn't deserve to be loved. I did not feel like I deserved to have a girlfriend. I didn't feel like I deserved to have friends. I just felt like I just didn't deserve that. This is a picture back coaching up at Olympia Sports Camp in Huntsville. This is me working with the quarterbacks and receivers. So my brain helped me be a good father to my 3 kids, but at times maybe not want to live. And when I'm talking and I present to kids all the way down to grade 4, I'll ask them when I get to this slide, what does that mean, not want to live? And it's good things happen in the last few years. Kids have been taught that it's okay to answer with the word suicide. Saying suicide does not trigger a person who's thinking of dying by suicide. And so I'll say, yes, I've lived through that. And I don't go in much detail beyond that with little kids. But the older people I talk to, and the more I go into detail what it's like to live with a person who has suicidal thoughts going through the brain. So I guess you get that for a little bit. So on my right in the picture, this is my youngest son, he's 25. This is my next son at 28. My daughter is 30 and has 2 kids. And this is me, and I did not want to live. And it didn't make sense. I was very blessed in so many ways, but my brain just didn't want to live, and it was in pain. And the only way I could think of stopping the pain was to kill my brain, which meant to kill my body. So I went to see the doctor, and because I couldn't sleep past 4:30 in the morning, I said, I need a pill. I can't turn my brain off and I can't remember things. And he immediately said, so again, this is 2001, 19 years ago, he said, it sounds like anxiety and depression. And my first thought was, I'm not sad. I thought depression was sadness. I said, I just need to stay asleep. Excuse me. And he said, you don't have to be sad. Your brain chemicals get depressed or stuck. And he suggested I see a therapist to get unstuck. And I'll tell you, 19 years ago, we hadn't started Bell Let's Talk yet. There was no one talking about the brain in public. There were no athletes talking about it. Actually, there was one, Ron Ellis, who, those are old enough, 1972, Ron Ellis, Mr. Hockey, Mr. Gentleman Hockey, he had shared back in that area where he lived with depression and anxiety, but there were very few people. So I really didn't think I wanted to see a therapist or a counselor or a shrink, but I had to do something to get back to work. And so counselors help us get unstuck when our brains get stuck in these loops of worry. So I went to see the counselor, and his name was Dave, called him Dr. Dave. And he says, well, what is it you're thinking about at 4:30 in the morning? And I said, well, I got mortgage payments and car payments and 3 kids all doing competitive sports and music. And I'm coaching after school a football team. And after dinner, I coach hockey and or the basketball team. And I went on all the things are going. And he says, slow down. I said, take a breath. There's the breath again. It keeps coming up, power of the breath. He said, let's go through it one at a time. He said, you have a house. Did you want a house? I said, yeah, I've got a nice house, a better house than I expected to have. We bought it way back in the 80s before the market went crazy. He said, you have 2 cars. Did you want 2 cars? Yeah, I needed a car. I needed a car. You know, they're not sports cars. They're teacher quality cars. Just good cars, but not great cars. One day, one of my kids might buy me that car. One of my sons sells cars. I still don't have that car yet. He says, okay, you have 3 kids. Did you want 3 kids? Yeah. And did you want to be a teacher? Yeah. And did you want to coach? Yeah. All the things that I was worrying about that I couldn't turn my brain off in the middle of the night were actually all my blessings, because most of us have been trained in the basics of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, and on the bottom is food, water, and shelter. And we are blessed in Canada. We all have, most of us have those things. The next level is people that love and care for us, and we have those things. So what I was worrying about weren't third world problems. And so he helped me see that I was looking at the cup as half empty, and our brain gets stuck in this cycle of worry when we look at the cup as half empty. And he helped me see it as half full, that those are actually blessings. And in neuron talk in our brain, what we focus on grows, or neurons that fire together, wire together. So this is what it's like working with psychologists. You go in there, you don't have to lie on the couch. I sat on a chair and talked to them, and they just help you untangle all the various things that are going on in your brain and get you going again. And so after talking to Dr. Dave, I slept. That was easy. I wish I would have talked to him years ago, but you know, there's this thing, and the Movember was part of it too, is getting men to deal with our health and talk about our feelings is a bit of a struggle, and we're still dealing with that, but we're getting better. Dr. Dave also said, keep a pen and paper beside your bed at night, in case you wake up in the middle of the night and your brain's racing on whatever it's racing on, like that math lesson I'm going to teach tomorrow that I've taught for 6 years, but it still won't shut off and I can't get back to sleep. Just write down, teach the math lesson, and that physical movement can help you get back to sleep. Don't pick up your computer, don't turn on the TV, grab something dull to read. And so I slept like a baby. It was wonderful. Lots of hair when I was younger. Again, good old Charlie Brown, worrying doesn't stop the bad stuff. It just ruins today. And my mom was the worrier in our family, and it was like a badge she had. And it's kind of like, I may have learned it there. Who knows what happened, but it doesn't do us any good to worry. It does well to plan things and to act on things, but just to worry doesn't actually help us. So as I shared my story with my staff, and then my staff said, we teach this in the health classes, grade 11 health. This is way back in 2010. We teach it in health classes. We teach it in anthropology, grade 11 anthropology. I started talking to kids, and kids would come back to my office after I talked in class and start sharing similar things. And more the kids I was seeing had very similar set of skills. And it was in their group of friends, they were the good listener. They were the one that other friends could come in and load on, and they had that ability, which we now call empathy, to understand other people's feelings. But and it's very different than sympathy. Sympathy is I feel sorry for you. Empathy is I actually feel for you. I've lived through something similar. And it can take a lot of feelings. And I realized I've had this my whole life, empathy, but we called it sensitivity when I was younger. And it's not something a boy would want to share with anybody else, particularly if you're playing football or any sports, that it's something we would have got picked on. So something that I was ashamed of for most of my life, that I only ever talked to girls who were friends about, is now my superpower. So I am the empathy man. It's important to have empathy. It's a skill employers are looking for. And it's not a soft skill. We need to get rid of that. It's an important skill. It's important to have humor, right? Relax. And my name's not David. I know I'm David. Serious subject. I use humor a fair bit when I'm talking with kids, just to, but it's just a brain. It's just a brain. Let's not get too negative on it. So this is actually a scan of the brain, and without depression and with depression, it shows how it's not firing properly, the brain chemicals. So I have here, it's called an energy stick. And the way an energy stick works is electricity goes through my hand and makes that work. And electricity goes through my whole body. And if we were in a circle, we could all join hands in a circle and that would work. What happens when you have depression and anxiety, something comes in and blocks chemicals in your brain from working, and your memory doesn't work, and concentration, decision making, and the joy of life just disappears. But when you learn what it was that was the block, and you deal with it and talk to a counselor about it, or whatever your method, you take it out, and back comes your ability to remember things and concentrate and decision making. So, neat little activity show that we actually have electricity running through our brains. And neurons are shaped like this. They have an open end and a ball end, and they all wire together. And we wire in, I before E except after C, and 9 times 8 is 72 on our mother's birthday. We wire things into our brain. But some of us wire worry into our brain and then can't turn it off. So here's how stress affects you in the different parts in the body. So fatigue, headaches, tight muscles, rashes, infections, constricted breathing. In the brain, worrying, indecision, negativity, foggy thinking, decisions, bad decisions, and judgment. Behavior, the substance abuse talked about before, people either decrease their appetite or some people eat more. Accident prone, restlessness, the insomnia, the loneliness, and then emotions, confidence, apprehension or fear, indifference, depression, irritability, and insomnia. So it hits a lot of different areas when we're under stress for a long period of time. So I'm going to do it again. My daughter Faith, my son Clark, and usually it only takes me 2 breaths, and I don't even use my hands most of the times. But I have 3 kids, so if I don't do Joel, I always feel guilty about it. Okay, I have to do all 3 of them. So we were raised, a lot of us, to hustle, and you had to go and you had to be grinding to be successful. And we're now learning a lot more about the power of aligning. And when you do, and it's all a lot of Buddhism and all those type of things believe in this stuff and have taught it for years. So Bell Let's Talk was 10 years ago when I was off work for the 6 months, or 3 months, and then off again for 3 months. And Clara Hughes started talking about it. I said, wow, there's someone else, an elite athlete who's got a brain just like me. And prior to that, I pretty much thought I was alone. And she shared, and she's got Olympic medals in 2 different sports, a summer and a winter sport. And that was one of the first steps for me getting better, was realize I'm not alone. And that's hopefully the messages I'm able to share here, is that you're not alone, or the people you work with are not alone. There's lots of us living with it. And more people are dealing with some of the symptoms right now than before. And maybe it's a good education thing we're going through right now, that more people will understand when someone says they are diagnosed with depression, what it actually means to have your brain that stuck. So 5 years ago, I took a course called Mental Health First Aid. I take my regular first aid course as a coach and a vice principal in case someone rolls their ankle on the rugby field or gets a bloody nose in school. And then they came up with this 2-day course. So I took this course, and here's one of the statistics: that 70% of the mental health, brain health problems start during childhood or adolescence. And we always thought it was an adult issue, probably because we didn't deal with it till we were adults. And I think this is so important, because when we learn how we get stuck, we can decrease that. And young people, 15 to 24, are more likely to experience this brain illness, depression stuff, and or substance use disorders. And I saw a lot of kids. No, I got to clarify. As a vice principal, you don't see a lot of kids. You see the same small group of kids a lot. Right? And they're not bad kids. Remember, I said I haven't met a bad kid yet. But I saw those kids, and they were getting into the drugs, and it's kind of like they've tried everything in their repertoire to do stuff. And a friend says, have a cigarette, it relaxes me. Smoke a joint, it relaxes me. And for my dad, have a beer, it relaxes me. Some people, we can do that, but other people, it sneaks up and we become addicted to it. And we don't know which one of us that's going to be. So I don't know how far mine goes back, but it was definitely, I was 14 years old when I first remembered this negative feeling starting to come on in my life. So I made this poster after taking the mental health first aid course, and I called it Caring for Your Brain Health, and I put it in my wall as a vice principal. And I asked kids who were not going to school, their marks were dropping, and how many of these things you're going through. You know, you're stressed out, your mind racing, all those things, you're missing class, memory problems, you know, exhausted, can't concentrate. And most of them would say, geez, Mr. Riley, I'm going through most of those. And I say, great, I'm not a psychologist or a doctor. Let's go see the child and youth worker in the school. She was phenomenal, or the social worker. For most of the kids that worked, it was great. A couple of statistics down below: half by age 14, 1 in 5. And I have to change this slide, because in Canada, it's now 1 in 2 people will experience it sometime in their life. That's just increased recently. So we've gone from 33% of us will get it sometime in their life to 50%. So now, if you can't get to sleep and stay asleep, that's the anxiety. And then sleeping all the time, that's when the depression takes over. And so some of the kids would say, no, Riley, I don't have any of those things. And I said, there's got to be something. I know this kid wants to do well. They told me they want to do well, but they're not getting past anything. So I asked them, how are you sleeping? And that's a pretty safe question. And they'd say, I sleep fine. So I said, well, what time do you go to bed at night? 11. Okay. What time do you get to sleep? 1. You just told me you sleep fine. And or it would be, you know, yeah, I sleep fine, but do you wake up in the middle of the night? Yeah, I often wake up early in the morning, and well, that's what my brain did. And once we got talking about the sleep in the brain, that got the conversation going. And then they'd often say, yeah, Riley, I'm actually going through most of those. I just don't want to talk to anyone about it. I wish I could say we saved all the kids. There were some kids that were so all down the rabbit hole already that we weren't able to help them. There were some kids that drugs had already taken over the control of their mind, that they weren't able to see the help. But we did help lots of kids. And my goal is, let's get them as young as possible, and let's have adults understand as young as possible. By the way, the reason I keep pointing right is the Zoom screen's on my other screen over here. Just realized it must look kind of funny to you guys. So this was just put out this study on phone use, that nighttime cell phone use leads to increased anxiety and depression and decreased self-esteem. I just shared this presentation yesterday with a youth group of leaders. And they really like the fact that this information is getting out there, that being on the phone, and it's not the phone that's a problem, it's being on the phone and not turning your brain off. And also there's a lot of negative stuff that may be happening on social media. And phone time replaces sleep, the melatonin. You know, if you can't sleep at night, you got to turn off all electronics an hour before you want to go to bed. And that's not a punishment, I tell parents when I'm working with parents whose kids are struggling. It's science. You need to turn it off an hour before. And if you don't talk it out, you will act it out. If there's things going on in your life, you can only hang them in on so long. You have to find someone you can talk about. And that's one of the things with Movember and trying to get men in particular to talk more about our mental health. And if it's good for men, it's good for women. The good news is women tend to be smarter than us on some of these things. And therapy doesn't have to be gushy. I call my Dr. Dave my brain strategist. I have a financial strategist. You know, you just go and talk about things. You don't have to go through your whole childhood to deal with things. There's lots of cognitive behavioral therapy things you can do to get help and support. And this one's really important for me. I'm not a sad person, okay? And I heard all the time from kids that they were so depressed because they failed a math test or they had trouble at home, they're so depressed. And they should be saying, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, or I'm sad, or I'm upset. But depression's a doctor's term. And the problem with people using it is if a person's had a couple bad days and they start using the term depression, they're going to look at a person like me and say, oh yeah, I just go for a walk when I'm depressed. And just snap out of it, Kev. Or just go hug a puppy or use a weighted blanket. And those are all good strategies, but it really messes things up. So I ask people once I've spoken to them, please don't use the term depression unless you're talking about medical depression. Use all these other terms to talk about your emotions. And mental disorders are brain disorders. You know, if I rolled my ankle, I call it a sprained ankle. I don't have another name for it. But somewhere on the line, the brain got called the mind to help us understand how it does things, and mind turned to mental, and your also mental has a big stigma attached to it. The stigma is often worse than the illness. So it's really important that that's why I move away from the mental disorders. And I've been doing this for 10 years, and the media is starting, not the media, the mainstream is starting to pick up on a little bit more. I can't take full credit for it. Again, I got it from someone else. But proper language helps drop the stigma.
Sorry, Kevin, I know you asked us to give you a 10-minute warning.
Format.
But I was so engrossed in it, I missed it. So you have about 5 minutes or so.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you run a little over, that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've come up with a term for myself as a mental illness disruptor. Disruptor is kind of a cool term. And I've never been a disruptor. My dad was a cop. I walked a very straight line. But when it comes to mental illness, I want to change some things because disruptors, when you want to change something, you can't go with the flow. You got to shake things up with people. You came up with a new idea. So I'm disrupting that. It's not mental illness. It's actually not even an illness. We're talking about the brain health and how the brain works and how it can get stuck and not get stuck and get unstuck. It's not sadness. You can be sad and have it. It's not a therapist, again, a psychologist, a shrink, a psycho, all those words attached. Call them a strategist, like whatever works for you. And sensitive, you know, that sensitive male brain, let's talk about empathy. So those are for my kind of disruptor ideas that I want to throw out there. So I'm going to skip through the next few because due to the time, and I knew I'd probably have to do this, but the fight or flight response, it's built into us, it's automatic, and it goes back to when we were cave people hunting tigers or the tiger was hunting us. And it's automatic, it's built into us. And we do a lot of judging based on that fight or flight. A little kid touches a hot stove, they pull their hand back automatically. There's no thought in there, okay? And we do the same thing when we judge other people, particularly when we're stressed. We look at other people and we judge them and we're upset and we're hard on them, we're hard on our kids. But when we're feeling crappy, we want other people to be nice to us. So we have to understand that sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. So this fight or flight, these brain glitches, it can happen when you're speaking on stage, going for a job interview or the vice principal's office, or it could be on a first date. It doesn't have to be a bad thing that causes stress. It could be just before a sporting event, just before a job interview you're going to. It does not have to be a bad thing, but we have the same physiological response. And it starts with our heart pounding. So just before you know you go to something important, your heart starts racing, thinking you're going to fight a tiger. And you know, you're going on stage, your heart's racing. And on a first date, we say our heart's all aflutter. Okay? That's to get all the blood to the big muscles ready to fight or to run away. The next thing we do is we sweat. That's our cooling mechanism. So you go to a job interview, your hand's all sweaty, you got to wipe it off first before you shake hands. On a first date, you go to hold hands, your hand's all sweaty. The butterflies in our tummy comes from all the blood's going to our muscles, ready to fight or flee. And so we shut down our digestive system. And that's where that feeling I'm going to throw up comes from, just before something that's exciting or challenging. It's also the gurgling your stomach does when you're on that first date as well. And then water. We all have water on stage when we're talking a lot. When I'm interviewing teachers for jobs and I ask a question, they struggle on it, and I see their throat goes dry and their skin turns red. I pass their water over to them. Just say, here, just take a drink. And they take a drink and then they're able to calm down and then answer the question. And on a first date, when you go to kiss that person, your mouth's all dry. When I talk to the little kids, I tell the boys, don't take the sweat from your hands and put it on your lips. That's not good. If you hold your hands out like this, that's the size of the human brain. And for those of you that have little hands, it's not proportional. Here's how the brain has evolved. One half of it. This is called the reptilian part of the brain, and all reptiles have it. And when we're stressed, blood goes here to be able to fight or flee. We have an inside part of our brain called the emotional system or the limbic system. And we can worry about something and picture it. We don't have to be in a fearful situation. We can just picture it, and we have a stress response. And this is the memory, decision-making part of our brain, and the joy and the creativity part, and the blood doesn't go there. So that's why when you're giving your speech in grade 3 or 4, and you can say it to your mom or dad, but you can't remember in front of your class for some people. Or you're asked a question and you have trouble in an interview answer the question, but you can answer it over coffee with your friends. Or on a first date, your hands are sweaty, your heart's pounding, your mouth's dry, your stomach's gurgling, and you can't think of anything to talk about. It's just the stress response. It's actually called the fight, flight, or freeze response. The freeze is a deer in the headlights, or when you walk by a bunny rabbit, it freezes before it decides to run away. And so here's the part to get to on how to beat this. So this is the part I needed to get to today. And it's what we focus on grows. And in our brain, neurons that fire together, wire together. 9 times 8 is 72, all that stuff. If we practice basketball, neurons wire in our brain to get better at basketball. If we practice math, we get better at math. If we practice worry and fear and anxiety, we get better at that. And it really is a habit that we practice, that some of us have learned, and we need to replace those habits. But when was the last time you actually needed this fight or flight response to save your life from something that was threatening you? But we have it on low burn all the time when we're going through stressful times for some of us. So I love F words, gets kids' attention. Particularly if you say a 4-letter F word, but this is just 4 F words. So today we're not allowed to hit or kick our boss or our employee or our friends. We're not allowed to run away, even though that's what our body wants to do. And we can't just freeze there and do nothing. That's one of the worst things. Imagine, when your kid did that and just didn't say anything to you. It's like, speak to me. It's like, no, they were stuck in freeze. So the 4th F is a 4-letter word, and it's flow. And that's all the different types of mindfulness stuff that you can do. And you have to find out the ones that work for you, whether it's this type of a breathing, whether it's going for the walk, whether it's the weighted blanket, whether it's calling a friend. There's tons and tons of different ways you can do it. They're built into this PowerPoint later on, because I knew I wouldn't get to all of it, but they're in there. The opposite of fight and flight is actually called rest and digest. For those that are into the science of it, it's called the automatic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and fight or flight is called the sympathetic system. Rest and digest is parasympathetic. After you've chased that saber-toothed tiger and ate it, you will rest and digest. Turn on the blood to the gut. Or if you ran away from the saber-toothed tiger and survived, you would rest and digest. And that's all part of the flow. Again, 1 breath can reset you. May not even need to take 5 once you get good at it. So this brain, this book called How to Create a Mind. Kurzweil is the guy that invented, I got to whisper this, "Hey Siri," because I don't want her to answer. And he did this great book on how to create a mind, similarly to how a computer is built. And he talked about the old brain and the new brain. So the new brain is all the stuff I've been talking about: the memory, concentration, decision-making, creativity, joy and happy, and the rest and digest. But this old brain, and by the way, they don't operate at the same time very well. They don't share nicely. One or the other wants to be in charge. And when it hits the fan, the old brain tends to win too much, because it thinks fight or flight, I'm going to die, and survival and reproduction are the most important things. Our heart rate goes up, our breathing rate, sweat response, tunnel vision, all those things, and anger. And that's the fight, flight, or freeze. And so the sleep is the important one. If you don't sleep, and he goes into so much detail in this book that validates the stuff I've been presenting on, if you don't turn off the brain to get that right amount of sleep and deep sleep, the old brain wins and it runs the show. And we have to turn off the old brain. So we have to take a day periodically and say, you know what? I can't go into work today. I'm taking a mental health day. But don't feel guilty about it. Because if you feel guilty about it, then you keep the anxiety loop going and you don't recover. So you have to practice your mindfulness strategies of your own. You got to look at the humor, right? The things that keep us awake at night. Okay. Repetitive complaining, right? Law of attraction. So So we're doing that actually today with physical distancing, but it's also important when you're in a negative environment to walk away and don't join in the other people that are being negative. And here's a kind of the key things to take away. What to be grateful for. You know, if you have to wake up early to go to work and all that stuff, well, maybe that means you have children to love to get ready. And if you have a house to clean, you know, that means you have a safe place. If you have laundry to do, that means you have clothes. Dishes to wash means food. Crumbs under the table. My kids are over. Grocery shopping, that's a whole different one today. It means you have money. Toilets to clean means you don't have outdoor plumbing, you have indoor plumbing. Lots of noise means there's people in your life, and questions about homework the kids are growing, and you're sore and tired. That means another good day has been there. And so we can refocus how we look at things and see things more as our blessings. Okay, so that's when I'm going to stop sharing. And the next strategies are detailed strategies that you can look at, and you'll get that, and I'll just kind of throw it back to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. You've given us a lot of information, and a lot of information I think that we can utilize practically anywhere. Some really good tools. We do have a question. Sandra Wright asks, what's the best way to have a conversation with someone that we think is depressed without offending them?
Oh, great question. There's a Safe Talk training, is a training that's separate from the mental health first aid course I took. And the Safe Talk training is to be comfortable talking about self-harm, suicide ideation, and things like that. And between those two courses, when someone's struggling, what you really want to do is, and I have a slide later on, it's, you know, when people offer me suggestions as to what to do, it's almost like, you don't think I tried those things? You don't think I tried better nutrition? You don't think, I'm a phys ed guy. I can't go outside for 3 or 4 days when my depression hits. You don't think I've tried all those things? And they need you to sit beside them and just listen and just say, you know what, I'm a bit concerned about something's different in you today. Do you feel like talking about it? And if they don't feel like talking about it, they know you're there. Now, that's kind of the level one, being there and not judging and not throwing solutions at them. But as parents and as bosses, we often want to fix things for people. Well, the one thing with mental health, the brain is, people don't want to be fixed by someone else. They want them just to listen and understand. Another side of it, though, is when I was still with Valerie and I was off work I was off like 4 or 5 weeks, and I hadn't got out of the house. She invited some of my high school buddies over, and they picked me up Saturday and took me out to lunch. And I was so mad inside that my brain's not working. I can't remember things. I have nothing to talk about. And you went and invited my friends over. And I was so furious. But 5 minutes out at a pub with my friends, we were talking about sports, girls we dated in high school. And so sometimes it's the other side that you do need a bit of a nudge. So it's not black and white, but I'd say the main one is, and I've got to speak to a lot of kids and get feedback from kids, sit beside them and be their friend.
Thank you. I have a question, Kevin. What are some tools or ways that we can model as leaders good brain health for our staff and volunteers?
Great question. My principal took a big risk letting me talk about mental health at a staff meeting 9 years ago. A big risk. He believed in it, and he believed in me. So openly talking about it, sharing that you know someone. If I was to ask in the room right now how many people know someone in their friends or families that live with anxiety, depression, or panic attacks, it would be 90% for sure. So we all know someone. So making it a comfortable conversation, dropping the stigma about it. When teachers knew that I was comfortable to talk about this, instead of coming into saying, I'm off tomorrow, I feel sick, like I'm going to throw up, they'd be able to tell me the truth and say, you know what, it's just hit the fan. This is going on here, here, and here. They'd be able to unload on me for a couple minutes, but all the things around the day. Pardon me, I'm just taking the day off tomorrow. Now, I had to mark them in as physically being sick. That was the only choice we had. We didn't have mental health days. But they didn't have to lie to me. They could tell me the truth because I understood. And I think that's where we're getting to with our leaders and our employers, understanding that, you know what, people are good. People want to do well. If they need a day, if you give them the day off, they come back recharged the next day even better, and they probably are going to work at home that day anyway.
Excellent. Is there any follow-up questions for Kevin before we close it out? Well, Kevin, on behalf of the group, I just want to say Thank you so much. I really feel that you are a mental health disruptor. There's a lot of power in words, and you do hear the word depression thrown around, which isn't, and to be able to use those words like sad, frustrated, particularly with children, and making it recognizable, if we can name our feelings, we can deal with them. So that's something I really took away from this, as well as what you focus on grows. And for me, that's very important messaging, because, if you focus on taking care of yourself, putting your oxygen mask on first, it's really going to make a difference. And this is the last day of National Volunteer Week. So thank you to all in our community that volunteer, and to all of Leadership Waterloo Region's volunteers that are on the line today. But particularly, those are folks we also need to look out for and make sure that they're not overcommitting or we're putting too much burden on them. So you've given me a lot to think about. So thank you so much, Kevin, and for sharing all your resources. Again, everyone that registered will receive a recording of the session. You'll receive all the tools and resources that Kevin did refer to, as well as the evaluation. Now, we are planning one for next Friday, just ironing out the last details, but we look to the group to come forward with, what do you want our sessions to be about? And as long as we're going through this era of uncertainty, Leadership Waterloo Region will try to pull together meaningful sessions that will help our nonprofit community through this. So we've had a lot of talk about volunteer management. How do we manage volunteers through this tough time? Some of us have taken on more volunteers than others, and there's always areas for resources. We're also information for financial support that's being offered through the government assistance programs. And anything else you want to learn about, please drop us a line and we'll try to make that a reality. Again, any questions, reach out to Bethan and I. We're happy to share all of our resources, connect you with anybody we can. And on our YouTube channel, which my son thinks is very cool, by the way, that his mom is on the YouTube channel, you can find all of our past sessions. And there's been quite a few that all of them have been excellent, and just so much information shared. So have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for choosing to spend your life or your lunch hour really thinking about your own mental health and the brain health of others. Thank you so much.
One other thing I meant to mention, maybe in your follow-up, I'm more than willing to speak to any other groups they're connected with.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. I know it's just such a topic that's on everyone's top of mind. You even find, when you're connecting with people, the first thing is, how are you? How are you feeling? How are you coping? I've had board members say to me, what are you doing for yourself? What's Bethan doing for herself to get through this time behind the scenes? And it's that mask we all wear at sometimes, but you really help people to find that mask shouldn't be on too long. And that's where I think people, we all have days where you have to kind of suck it up and face it,
Yeah.
but that shouldn't be your normal way of life.
No.
And that was one of my big takeaways in supporting